how we can emerge from the pandemic to an even stronger European Green Deal and how we can secure Europe's environmental leadership. We're exchanging our opinions about how the deal can accelerate the transition towards true sustainability in the face of one of the most challenging social and economic crises of our times. I hope you've already been with us this morning to follow Kate Raworth's inspiring keynote speech. You have seen the poll. More than half of you in the audience believe that the European Green Deal as it stands now brings about important policy changes, has presented important strategies, but it's not yet transformative. So Kate's message was very clear. She said that we need unprecedented ambition, we need courage from the political leadership, and she also made it very clear that we need to close the gaps between the commitments and policies that contradict these commitments, such as the CAP or the EU's trade policies. So before we start with the second session, let me remind you that you can use the Q&A box to ask your questions to the Commissioner. So start right now to put your questions down. And also share your thoughts with us on Twitter, #EEB20. Now I'll hand over to our Secretary General, Jeremy Wates, who is going to sit down virtually with the Environment Commissioner, Virginijus Sinkevičius, to discuss the EU's environmental leadership in his first year of office. Jeremy.
Thank you, Patricia, and good morning to everyone, and welcome also from me to our conference today. We're delighted to welcome Environment Commissioner Sinkevičius to this conference. Commissioner, you follow in a long line of Environment Commissioners, but I think it's fair to say that you are the first Environment Commissioner whose portfolio has been recognized as the first of 6 priorities, as Ursula von der Leyen put it. And so the expectations are very high, no pressure. If we see the European Green Deal as the flagship policy of this Commission, on which its success and or failure will be judged, you and the Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans are in fact the flag bearers. So we're really delighted to have you with us today, and I'd like to start off with a rather general question. As you look back on your first year, almost first year in office, what do you feel were the greatest achievements of the Commission, and of these, which were the hardest to win, and where were your biggest disappointments in this first year?
First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation today, all the good work you do. The EEB isn't always easy on us, but I appreciate that. And I'm usually more interested in what happened next. But of course, there is a lot to take away from this first year as well. First of all, we live in times of crisis. Human beings tend to go back to old solutions, to business as usual. And I'm very proud that here in Europe, we did the opposite. Despite the dramatic situation, we kept our compass set on building a future, a better future. As President von der Leyen said in her State of the Union speech, the pandemic showed the limits of a model that values well-being. It reminded us of our fragility and the fragility of our environment, with glaciers that are melting, forests that are burning, and crops disappearing because of droughts. Climate change, biodiversity loss, natural resources depletion, and pollution are interrelated and interdependent. And the only solution is to tackle them in an integrated way. We have just listened to Kate Raworth, author of the famous donut, and I agree with her fundamental message. We are out of balance. So absolutely, I agree with her fundamental message. So we are out of balance. And policymakers should use one single test for a policy. They should ask if it's ambitious enough to keep us inside planetary boundaries. we have a decade to change the current trends and deliver a systemic change. I come back to your question. Certainly, the EU Green Deal is a key step to start changing the trends. The fact that its objectives are underpinning the EU recovery plan endorsed last July by the European leaders is a major political achievement. It is a unique and real opportunity to make a paradigm shift and move towards a sustainable, carbon neutral, and of course, inclusive and regenerative economic model. We have committed to become carbon neutral by 2050 and are discussing more ambitious climate targets by 2030. We are committed to address biodiversity loss through the biodiversity strategy and farm to fork. I'm proud that these strategies are, yes, ambitious, but yet achievable. And more people we have on board. We are tackling, of course, resource depletion through the circular economy action plan, the move towards regenerative economy that gives back more to the nature than it takes is the path to take climate change and environmental degradation. And of course, minimizing pollution and enrich our natural capital. I think it's a huge transition. It's big transition. It's a huge opportunity, but of course it's a massive challenge as well. And that's why we are working on solutions with a place for everyone, where no one is left behind. Of course, it won't be easy, but like I said, we might not have a second chance. And at this moment, with recovery and resilience plans, we have a unique chance. We have a unique chance to build back better and help those who are in need of technical, of financial help to get on track of the Green Deal and foster the implementation of the Green Deal.
Thank you, Commissioner, for that. And I'm very happy that you were able to listen to Kate Raworth's introduction comments earlier. And I think one of the things you will have heard there is that she made a very clear distinction between the vision and leadership behind the European Green Deal, the targets, and the legislation of finance that need to follow and deliver. And she was very full of praise for the first, more critical of the second, and the climate targets, climate neutrality by 2050, minus 55 net, not ambitious. But perhaps the biggest concerns over legislation of finance. So my question to you is, how do you get from that vision, which I think many of us would agree is a very, very positive vision, and it's really been refreshing to have a Commission President coming in with that commitment. But how do you get from there to actually delivering on the ground? Is it mainly the legislation? Is it mainly the finance? Is it a problem with policy coherence? Is it about implementation and enforcement of existing legislation? I mean, probably it's a bit about all of those things, but which do you see as where the biggest challenges are?
No, that's a little bit of everything. You can't exclude one bit, of course. Addressing legislation gaps is important. Implementing properly legislation is crucial. But that cannot be done, and some of the targets cannot be achieved without a proper funding. I always say, also as a former minister of economy, usually countries, member states put the priorities. You can see the real priorities where the money are actually put, and that's crucial for implementation. But last but not least, what is crucial, of course, is society support. As we speaking about the transition, which is upon many sectors, and it cannot be done without society support, without having everyone on board, having with us, without, of course, us offering them a possibilities, a something better in exchange, something clearly better in exchange, and this is far overarching through whole Europe, from youth unemployment, let's say, in a south problem, to mining, coal mines in certain regions in Central Europe. So We have a huge puzzle to solve. I'm happy we have a solution for that. And speaking, of course, mainly the Green Deal, but speaking about the money, I think what's most important that looking at the recovery and resilience plans in their national recovery and resilience plans, we are asking member states to meet the 37% climate spending target. At the same time, the national recovery and resilience plans needs to comply with the do no significant harm principle and to make sure that they observe the environmental adequacy. So these plans must be fully coherent with other plans to be prepared under EU law, such as the European semester, the national energy and climate plans, the just transition plans. So this governance structure will help us ensure that the next generation EU budget is a driver of truly transformational change that underpins a truly green recovery. So, of course, it means that Commission will be studying the submissions of national plans very carefully. My services, my cabinet, and myself will also be closely associated to these national plans, and that's why we are making the case now while being drawn up. Some member states already submitted first draft and received very quick responses from Commission. But very clearly, we want to see public expenditure supporting the green transition, including through the green public procurement, green budgeting, carbon pricing, and of course, environmental taxation with lower taxes on labor and more incentive for companies to avoid harming the environment. So it is not just about making the right investments, it's also about structural reforms at national level, putting a price on unsustainable resource use and applying the polluter pays principle with a view to ending subsidies that end up harming the environment. And that will help us to have everything on board. You're going to have EU legislation properly implemented, because otherwise it will cost you. Secondly, of course, you offer the opportunities for people, and you get them on board.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I think people will take reassurance from your comments about, how the Commission is going to look seriously about not only that the 37% of the recovery and resilience funding is spent in support of the European Green Deal objectives, but that the other, whatever it is 63%, is also spent in a way that does no harm. So I think that's very important. And I think it wasn't a foregone conclusion that the European Green Deal wouldn't be sidelined by the pandemic. And I think I at least appreciate the resilience of that concept within the Commission and among leaders. But of course, the devil is very much in the detail. And I think it will be a concern to see that we don't see funding going into, for example, fossil fuels, because that has been happening up to now. So I think, I think I'm very happy you're saying you're going to scrutinise that, but we will also scrutinise it, or into, for example, non-green hydrogen. But I'd like to move on to another topic. We lost a little bit of time at the beginning, so I'd like to push on to another topic and talk about agriculture. Because, as you know, NGOs have generally welcomed the 2030 biodiversity strategy as one of the good products of the European Green Deal so far. We now want to see that it's well funded, that it's well implemented. But as you know very well, agriculture is the single biggest driver of biodiversity loss in the EU. And there is huge disappointment at the direction that the CAP negotiations have gone in. We heard Kate Raworth saying that actually the credibility of the European Green Deal now hangs on this, and echoing calls from many NGOs, including the EEB, to withdraw the CAP proposal. This was a proposal that was developed under the Juncker Commission. It was not designed to be European Green Deal compatible, and it's not. So we think there's a strong argument for it to be withdrawn. So my straight question to you is, will the Commission be willing to withdraw the proposal as called for by many NGOs and present a new proposal? And if you're not, how do you see the way forward to address the biodiversity crisis, but not only the biodiversity crisis, because the CAP is also very relevant to the climate crisis. And if agriculture is going to pull its weight in relation to climate, it's very hard to see how that's going to happen on the basis of where the current negotiations are going. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question. I'm happy that we finally have a good connection and we can have a nice exchange. I'm very proud, first of all, of the EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030, because it's ambitious and comprehensive. It addresses all the main drivers of biodiversity loss, and it proposes concrete actions and commitments. Even before we presented it, we knew it was only the beginning. Change will only happen if it gets implemented properly. So that was always going to be the big task for the next few years. And we know we are asking for a lot, and some people are clearly frightened by that. We need to significantly reduce the footprint of our agricultural systems inside and outside the EU. In fact, our assessments show we need to halve our footprint to return to a level of impact that is within planetary boundaries. That's why we need to aim for a CAP with strong environmental and climate ambition. And we are doing it not because we are a bunch of sort of green hippies. We are doing it to also help the farmers and to consolidate the future of EU agriculture, because they are first victims in the line. It's the only sure path to safeguarding the economic, environmental, and social benefits for farmers and citizens for the short and long term. And when we're speaking, I was asked multiple times regarding the food security. This is the threat for our food security. Losing harvest, this is the threat to our food security. Losing pollinators and what nature does, we cannot replace that system anyhow. This is the biggest threat. So both Council and the European Parliament have finalized and adopted their position on the CAP reform. This was a necessary step enabling two co-legislators to start negotiations with a view to reaching an agreement between co-legislators. But the positions that were adopted a few weeks ago is only a starting point. Some elements of the co-legislators' positions are not necessarily at the level of environmental ambition of the Green Deal. I think notably about the positions with regard to conditionality that was included in the Commission's proposal with the aim to link direct payments and certain rural development measures to an implementation of a range of climate, biodiversity, and animal welfare standards. And of course, we need to remember that the success and ambition of the CAP depends on the quality of national CAP strategic plans. They provide opportunities for flexibility and high ambition at national level. And we are already engaged in a structured dialogue with the member states to ensure they make best use of this opportunity. And as I said at the beginning, I very much welcome the efforts of the EEB in this area. You are doing a very important job in raising awareness of the importance of the CAP and of everything at stake here. And thank you very much for that. I think while the positions are so far quite apart now, there is a room for negotiations. So I would say that we go into trilogues and we aim for very ambitious agreement, which is, I think, within the possibility of reaching. And of course, Commission is going to be very much pushing for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem with that is that you're entering the trilogues in a situation where none of the three positions on the table, the Commission's original proposal or the positions of the Parliament and the Member States, are satisfactory. And, you know, there's a kind of centre of gravity principle, which means that you end up somewhere in the middle of those three positions. And that's not a good place to be. And it's not a European Green Deal compatible place to be. So that's why, you know, I think there is this demand to withdraw the proposal, but I take it from your response that you can't tell us that that's what the Commission's going to do. You've mentioned the national CAP strategic plans, and that's indeed another avenue to pursue. Do you see the Zero Pollution Action Plan, which is in preparation now? I think it's due to come out in Q2 of 2021. Do you see that as a possible avenue for tackling agriculture, and we're not saying this to let you off the pressure in terms of withdrawing the CAP proposal, because we think that needs to be done anyway. But could you see, I mean, I will just say in passing that we're very happy with the chemical strategy for sustainability as the first kind of big element of this zero pollution ambition. But you now have this action plan coming in, which can address water, air and soil. So is there some potential for tackling agriculture's footprint through that instrument?
Maybe a couple words on a CAP. I think there is, we shouldn't be jumping into any conclusion yet. As I said, there is a possibility for ambitious negotiations and aligning CAP with the Green Deal, with the ambition of biodiversity, with the ambition of, yes, you're right in saying that all the strategies we are adopting under the European Green Deal, they are interconnected. Whether it's a circular economy action plan or a chemical strategy or biodiversity strategy, they are all interconnected and aiming for the main goal of the Green Deal. And yes, of course, zero pollution ambition is going to be part of this big picture. The first step was done, of course, with the chemical strategy, and it is important to remember, of course, why we are doing this in the first place, because there is an urgent need for action, and we had a recent confirmation of that from the EEA, Healthy Environment, Healthy Lives report. There are also huge differences and inequalities to be addressed, and of course, a toxic-free environment is crucial for protecting nature, but also citizens. We need to do a much better job at monitoring, reporting, preventing, and remediating pollution from air, water, soil, definitely noise, and consumer products. And that means taking a systemic look at all our policies and regulations from the angle of zero pollution. The plan is to build on and complement actions we are already taking to achieve the zero pollution ambition. I'm thinking of pollution-related elements. Again, farm to fork as one of these strategies, let's say, but I've mentioned others before. And when we talk about zero pollution, we're also talking about actions that make a significant contribution to our ambitions for the climate and circular economy. It really will be a harmonized approach in the spirit of the Green Deal. In practical terms, we have published the roadmap for the action plan and are now in the public consultation phase, and we will be launching the online public consultation very soon. You know our procedures. The preparatory work is very through with evaluations and impact assessments when they are needed for dedicated initiatives. And of course, as always, I call on you and who are watching and join us today. We will be very happy to receive your inputs and ideas now or in writing, both, of course, I hope, and definitely remain within our constructive dialogue.
Thank you. Yeah. Listening to your second round of comments on the CAP, if I was listening to you correctly, I think you didn't rule out the possibility of the Commission withdrawing the proposal if the trilogue discussions don't go in the right direction. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. We're certainly very interested in the zero pollution action plan, especially if it results further down the line in some legally binding measures to address those areas. I'd like to move to another topic now. One of the files that you inherited, some might call it a poisoned chalice, was concerning the Aarhus Convention. And as you know, the EU has for a long time, in fact more or less forever, been in non-compliance with the Aarhus Convention because of the inadequate possibilities for access to justice at the level of the EU institutions. There are problems at the member state levels, but that's something different. And the Commission was really vigorously opposing the measures to correct this until recently. And last month we had the Commission's proposal to resolve this problem. And I must say we're very happy with one aspect of the Commission proposal. It does address the single biggest obstacle to NGOs being able to go to court, which is, I don't want to get too technical here, but the measures that could be challenged were limited to measures of individual scope, and most measures that NGOs wanted to challenge were measures of general scope. But there are other very serious obstacles to access to justice. Just as one example, state aid decisions. Under the Commission's proposal, there won't be a possibility to challenge that. Member states will be able to challenge it, and but not civil society. And this is these decisions are hugely significant. They can decide whether the fossil economy is being supported by a member state or not. And so I just want to know, I mean, obviously you will start by defending the Commission proposal. That's normal in the forthcoming co-decision process. But I want to know if you would be open, if the other institutions come forward with improvements like that, will the Commission be open to accepting them?
Thank you, Jeremy, for your question. First of all, let me return briefly to CAP so that I wouldn't be misquoted and that wouldn't have an impact on negative impact on upcoming trialogue. So, Commission President, in her written answer, stated very clearly, Commission is not considering withdrawing CAP, and we are going to negotiate with the co-legislators ambitious CAP within the Green Deal ambition and within our plans, our core plans for the future, 2030 and 2050 plans. Now, returning to your question on Aarhus Convention, I'm of course very glad about your positive feedback on some of the parts on our recent proposals. Citizens and NGOs play an absolutely vital role in shaping and of course implementing our policies. And I'm happy that we were able to deliver, to make a step further. On state aid decisions, it is actually the Aarhus regulation itself that provides an exception for public bodies acting, performing, and administrative review functions. And this exception, which applies to the Commission, amongst others, when reviewing state aid decisions, takes into consideration the fact that such decisions are national. The Commission's decisions in such cases have to comply with EU environmental rules. And the same goes for, of course, the member states' aids, but such decisions can and should be challenge at national. The problem must be tackled at the source. On your concerns relating to implementing measures, decisions requiring implementing measures are not altogether excluded from the scope of the proposal. It is only those specific provisions that requires national implementing measures that are accepted, and only temporary until such measures are adopted. Where implementing measures are taken at EU level, the decisions requiring such implementing measures and those implementing measures will be subject to administrative review under the new proposal. So very technical, I know, but probably it needs further explanation. So probably important to mention that on the other hand, where the implementing measures are national, it is normal that they should be challenged in national courts. And there is always a possibility for these cases to be referred to the Court of Justice for a preliminary ruling. So ultimately, the EU level decisions can be challenged as well. We are well aware of the many remaining obstacles to access to justice in member states. And the Commission has already taken action to ensure that redress at national level is as effective as possible within the limits of course, its competences as defined in the treaty. And we will continue to do so, acting according to the four priorities we have identified in the communication adopted together with the legislative proposal to set such obstacles aside. It has adopted together with the new Aarhus regulation, a communication about what needs to be done to set such obstacles aside. So the Commission straight away commits itself to take measures to help member states to comply with their obligations, such as training, information sharing, capacity building, and of course, when necessary, it is also we also prepared to enforce these obligations.
Can I just say I'm really delighted the extent you've engaged in this topic, and there's a serious danger here of me following down that road and getting into a more detailed discussion on it, because as many people know, I tend to talk far too much about the Aarhus Convention, but I'd love to take that up with you in another conversation. But for now, I think it's important to move on to a question about the sort of wider geopolitics, and to what extent you see that as either helping or hindering the European Green Deal. Obviously, the last few days we've had this Biden victory, and the prospect of a climate-denying president being evicted for the White House has come a little bit nearer. So that's obviously positive, though as Kate Raworth has pointed out, we shouldn't take it for granted that that's necessarily going to be in plain sailing. But also there's the prospect of Brexit coming up, and the risk, I think a very real risk, of a semi-deregulated United Kingdom post-Brexit acting as a drag on the ambition of the environmental ambition of the EU. Do you see that as a threat, and what do you see as the solutions?
Thank you. Absolutely important part to touch upon, realizing that, of course, EU on its own cannot take this challenge, but definitely we can lead the way, and I'm happy we're doing so. The European Green Deal also, it recognizes that Europe can't deal with these issues like climate change, biodiversity loss, resource depletion, pollutions, and of course the ocean challenges on its own. We need a global dimension to our policies, and there is an obvious need to engage closely with all our partners. For the EU trade policy, that means, of course, ensuring that the Green Deal components, including its sustainability, are always at the front of our minds. Trade policy must actively support and be part of the ecological transition. And this is what we were talking about, to really understand and real, for sure. Everyone who is watching knows it, but just what sort of big of a challenge it is. It's not sort of environmental or climate portfolio challenge. It's so much overarching. So trade policy is key when we're speaking about our foreign partners. As I think we can use our market leverage to promote an ambitious environmental agenda around the world, systematically, of course, including key obligations on climate and environmental in our trade agreements. Of course, we're also taking a holistic approach to sustainability across all chapters of our free trade agreement, notably on regulatory cooperation, public procurement, trade in goods, agriculture, of course, energy, financial sector, raw materials, and probably so on, including even intellectual property rights. When we do that, we will really manage to make a difference. And I think it is important to offer incentives to encourage third countries to make the green transition as well. And we must push our partners to be as ambitious as we are, especially when it comes to protecting the world's forests, stopping the illegal wildlife trade, and of course, fighting pollution. And I'm happy that, when in December, this commission, when stepped into office, the first delivery was actually the Green Deal. And we were, let's say, one of the first countries we were one of the first to very clearly state about our decarbonization 50. And now we see more and more joining us. I'm happy about Japan, about South Korea announcement. We have and probably a lot people already forgot, but Australia and New Zealand are there for a while now. China with their 2060 ambition, And now we have a result with, of course, with the United States with completely different approach. Joe Biden stated that it's going to be one of the first things he's going to do. That he returns to Paris Agreement on one of the first days when he's in office. Of course, we're all going to be closely watching it. After that, I texted straight away with John Kerry, who actually signed the Paris Agreement in 2016, that there is a lot of work ahead of us, and we're ready to take on this challenge with a partner, a reliable partner like the United States, but also other countries. And we all looking forward for CBD 15 in Kunming in China.
I hate to butt in, but we're running a bit over time. We started late, and so we're going deliberately a bit over time, but we will need to wrap up soon. And I really hate to interrupt, because what you're saying now is extremely interesting, and I think very, great material for a longer discussion. But we do need to wrap up in a few minutes. So I'd just like to put a final question to you, and if you can answer in a minute or so. You spoke earlier about what did you say? You said the EEB is not always easy on us. And I take that as a kind of a compliment, because we like to praise you when you do things well. We like to be critical when you're not. And we think that's the basis of a good relationship here. But what do you think that not just the EEB, but the wider environmental movement could do better to achieve our objectives? As someone sitting inside, the Berlaymont, in the heart of the decision-making process, how could the environmental movement be more effective, in your view?
I think now, of course, it's very hard to assess sort of what happened in the past year, because we've been quite busy tackling the pandemic. But I think first of all, you should be very proud of what you have already achieved, because our plan of full decarbonization 2050, the Green Deal, is a fruit, first of all, of your work. I mean, the NGOs, of course, together with those people who were there on the streets every Friday, speaking for their future, speaking for the future they want, and of course the politicians reacted to that call. Nevertheless, the challenge is huge, and we should not take anything for granted. There is so many challenges and such a long way to go ahead, where we will need to unite our powers, where we most likely need your checks and balances constantly, and we will definitely keep a fruitful dialogue. And I hope we will be able, like this conversation today, to listen to each other and give quite clear answers to each other by going ahead. But my probably wish for the very end, not to exclude and forget the biodiversity. You managed to do, and of course with the climate change, a buzzing word, but we tend to forget about all the other pieces that are important. And here probably comes biodiversity with everything related to it. We need to step up that action much more on the biodiversity. I think we need to show society what are the benefits of biodiversity and what are the losses, which are very obvious. Because sometimes I think this gets quite lost in the discussion, and discussion then spins quite a lot around climate change, not really looking further down the path. We have a very ambitious biodiversity strategy. It's achievable with clear benefits, with very clear benefits to society. It's not only about environment. It's basically about us being part of this planet. So I think it would be shame if we wouldn't manage to implement it. And of course, there we will need your help, sometimes maybe push.
Yes, thank you very much. And that's a very good point to end on. I mean, this was supposed to be, the Paris, this year was meant to be the Paris moment for biodiversity. That's obviously postponed, but hopefully that will arrive. And I want to thank you belatedly for your clarification on CAP. Although I would have preferred you clarified it in the opposite way, but at least you did make the position clear now. So thank you very much, Commissioner, for joining us today. It's been really great to have to hear your thoughts and your perspectives. And you can count on us as a strong ally, sometimes a critical one, in the 4 years ahead of your mandate, and we wish you luck in that period. And with that, I thank you and I hand back to Patrizia.
Thank you, Jeremy, and thank you, Commissioner, for this interesting dialogue this morning about where we stand with the rollout of the European Green Deal. And thank you to all of us for staying with us despite the initial problems that luckily got solved. And thank you for the extra 5 minutes you gave us to make up for the time lost this morning with the Commissioner. So we'll have a break now, and we'll be right back at 11:15 with the third and final session, the panel discussion. So we'll see you in a little bit more than 10 minutes.